morning again, everyone. Boker Tov. Chag Sameach. This is really, for us, a very exciting day, an opportunity to come together as a broad community with about a dozen partnering institutions that reflect the diversity of the Jewish community, to have a series of conversations and learning opportunities about Yerushalayim. And we wanted to begin that by bringing together, as Rav Avi so beautifully framed, diversity of opinion on what it means to express our love of Medinat Yisrael from different places on the religious, political spectrum and worldview. Because there's something unusual, there's something we must feel today, which is here we are celebrating, loving, connecting to Medinat Yisrael, connecting to Yerushalayim, but we're not there. And that's an aspect of our religious and spiritual lives that we grapple with. What does it mean to be a Zionist? What does it mean to support Medinat Yisrael, to love Medinat Yisrael from where we sit here in the Galut? And so we wanted to bring together three passionate educators, three thought leaders, three people with deep loving commitment to Medinat Yisrael, and each of whom lead communities, guide communities in so many areas in thinking about Medinat Yisrael, to have a conversation about what it means to be Zionists in America, in the Galut. We have a full day of learning ahead, a full day of engaging ahead. We wanted to begin with this conversation, which in some way will frame the goal of the day, which is to bring together diverse perspectives, diverse points of view, diverse entry points on the ways we love and learn about and connect to Medinat Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. The format of our time together for this panel is as follows. I'm going to introduce our panelists and give each of them an opportunity for about 5 minutes to offer some opening statements on these questions. What does it mean to me to be a Zionist, to support Medinat Yisrael in America, in the diaspora? And as an educator, as a leader, as a communal professional, how do I think about how to impact American Jewry and the general community? And how, looking ahead to generations to come, how do we effectively create a healthy, a passionate, a dynamic, and engaged Zionism? You have the program that has the full bios of our presenters, but just so we know who we are, from my right, starting closest to me, with Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer, president of the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, someone who's written so powerfully and eloquently in so many fora about the power of our relationship to Medinat Yisrael and the necessity of a dynamic engagement with Medinat Yisrael, and how she fits into the broader view of what it means to be a Jew, harnessing the past, living in the present, and looking forward to the future. And Shalom Hartman Institute, in its own way, has been a critical contributor to healthy conversation, to creating educational modules in communities to learn about and engage in meaningful discussion about Medinat Yisrael. Rabbi Asher Lopatin, the president of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah Rabbinical School, from where I am myself a Musmach and graduate, rabbinical school that teaches an inclusive, open, and welcoming Torah. Rabbi Lopatin is a past modern Orthodox synagogue rabbi in Chicago for 18 years, and of course a deep, deep love and commitment to Medinat Yisrael, and has been an envisioner of Karmit, a pluralistic and religiously diverse community developing in Medinat Yisrael, and a thinker and writer on issues of importance to us in Medinat Yisrael. And finally, Elizabeth Burney, we're so grateful joining us from even beyond the Riverdale community. She is the ZOA, Zionist Organization of America's National Director of Special Projects, and the Long Island Queens Executive Director, someone deeply involved in politics and supporting Medinat Yisrael from so many angles and so many perspectives, an activist, someone who's been involved in bringing legal challenges against BDS, and a frequent contributor and writer in the public sphere and public community. So welcome to each of you. Feel free to use the mic or not to use the mic. And again, an opportunity for an opening statement. What does it mean to you to be a Zionist in America? And as an educator and a leader, how do you think about how to impact American Jewry and the next generation to create thoughtful, engaged Zionists?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Stephen. If you can't hear me, let me know, and I'll use the microphone. I appreciate, of all the questions that you asked, the use of the term Zionist and Zionism as a means to open up this conversation. There's an enormous amount of tension and anxiety, I think, in the American Jewish community today, in some ways unanticipatable one generation ago, where once upon a time the State of Israel was the biggest consensus builder for the Jewish community, both especially for Jews in America not living there. And today I think there is no more polarizing topic or disunifying force in the Jewish community than topics that relate to the State of Israel. But the particular framing of the word and the use of the term Zionism is instructive because I think we are, as a community, making a major category error in how we understand what Zionism is actually supposed to mean. And I think very simply, at some point, probably right after 1948, but we're only experiencing the repercussions of it now, Zionism transformed from being a discourse of imagination to a discourse of loyalty. Right? If you imagine the pre-state period when you had all of these different forms of Zionism competing for the imagination of Jews, right? We know this story, religious Zionism, the socialists, different forms of political Zionism. What you essentially had was the Jewish people engaged in a collective imaginary conversation of, if we ever get a chance to be in charge of our own state or in charge of our own destiny, what elements do we want to have? I mean, it's like a desert island conversation. What would we want to have given the context and the environment in which we could play out our visions and our dreams? And then we as Jewish people had the extraordinary fortune, combined with successful efforts on our own part, as well as things that are beyond our control, to receive a particular vision of what that state of Israel should be. A particular alignment of a political vision, a social and economic vision, and a religious vision. And our discourse in the community of Zionism went from being fantasy about what we would want were we given this opportunity to have a state, to what does it mean to express our loyalty to the state that we currently have. Now, I think there are probably good historical reasons why we had to make that shift, right? What the State of Israel needed in 1949 was not for Jews to fantasize about in what ways it should be different, but what it needed of Jews was philanthropy, advocacy, lobbying, and all of those things that helped to build up a nascent state. But the cost of that shift from imagination to loyalty is something that we're experiencing now, which is that it's very hard over multiple generations to amount for Jews a discourse about something that is supposed to be central to who they are as Jews, but that only requires of them loyalty and commitment to what is. I mean, think about the difference between, you take a phrase like the Promised Land. The Promised Land, and Rav Avi alluded to this before, the Promised Land is both a place, a destination, and it's a metaphor, right? It's not merely about getting to the physical place of the Promised Land, it's about getting to a place in which all of your hopes and dreams are fulfilled in that place. Now, the State of Israel, we love the State of Israel, but it ain't perfect. And even though those who care most deeply about the State of Israel are aware that it's not perfect. So we may have arrived to the Promised Land in the literal sense, but I think it's fair to say that we as a Jewish people have not arrived to the Promised Land in the metaphorical sense. But the way in which we are thinking and talking about Zionism is demanding of people a loyalty to the arrival at the literal Promised Land without enough oxygen, space, and openness to be able to allow them to fantasize about the imagined or the metaphorical Promised Land. So I'll just say one more line and then hand over to my colleagues. I think there's what for us to talk about. What I think Zionist education has to become for Jews in the diaspora is a re-invitation to the imaginary conversation, in which we're talking not merely about what does it mean to be loyal to and supportive of the State of Israel as it currently is, but we invite people to participate in a conversation about what the State of Israel ought to be. I think that's true both for Israelis, who must be engaged in a conversation that is about building and constructing realities that are different than the present, but I also think it includes us as Jews in the diaspora. If we want to believe in the notion of the Jewish state as a nation state of the Jewish people, then some of us are maybe a little bit more citizens than others because some pay taxes and serve in the army. But if we think of ourselves as participants in this broader nation of the Jewish people, then we have to make space, we have to make room for people to participate in Zionist conversations that are not merely about affirming and supporting who the State currently is, but are about an involvement in imagining what the State of Israel might be and could be, and giving them space and oxygen to make that conversation possible.
Thank you. I think it's a real beautiful image. And I guess as the new president of the yeshiva that Rav Avi Weiss founded, Yeshivat Chovei Torah, I see some of Musmachim here, in addition to Rav Steven. I have to think about, if I'm an old-fashioned Zionist, even from that period of dreaming, it's everything we said in our tefillah, V'havienu Tzion, V'havienu Shalom, Me'arvak Hearts, bring us back to Zion, bring us to Israel. It's Kabbalah Shofar, blow the great shofar to bring us to Israel. It's all about moving to Israel. So what am I doing in America? Training rabbis that mostly will be in America, in synagogues, on college campuses, in hospitals in America. What are we doing? Now, some of our students do go to Israel, and that's very exciting, doing amazing things. But I actually want to hold on to this image of, I think Judaism wants us to get to Israel. And we can't all do it right now, even in our generation. And Yirmiyahu said to the Jews in Bavel, you got to build your society, you got to build your community. So when we're not in Israel, we do have to build American institutions and American Jewry, or wherever we are in Canada and Europe, so we have to work hard on that. But we can never give up this dream of going to Israel. And in a sense, I agree with Yehuda very much that the state of Israel is the protector of that dream, is the enabler of the dream of moving to Israel. So it's a little different, but it's, again, the state of Israel is that incredible vehicle that allows Jews to live in Israel, that has allowed millions and millions of Jews to return to Israel, and that, as well as human beings can, guarantees that we have our place for where our dreams can be fulfilled. So I think that we have to constantly ask ourselves, what am I doing to either get myself or my family to Israel, to get those around me to Israel, or my children, or my friends? We have to build up American Jewry, make sure it's strong. And the third thing I would say, the responsibility for American Jews and American Zionists, is a little bit similar to what Yehuda said, is to create models for the state of Israel, for the people of Israel. So I see it very much in the modern Orthodox and the open Orthodox realm, that the work we are doing here, the way we are training rabbis, the way our rabbis are working with communities, the way lay leaders are pushing their communities forward and thinking, what is Judaism about? What is Orthodoxy about? Those models will impact Israel and will impact communities in Israel. And we see it in many different ways. This the idea that I had for a pluralistic community in Israel came from my work in Chicago, in working with starting a pluralistic day school, in a welcoming synagogue like HIR that is an Orthodox synagogue, but not just for Orthodox people. So these models that we work hard here, ultimately, God willing, they will have an impact on Israel. And so by our working hard on American Judaism, we are going to be Zionists by creating the models where Jews can live in Israel. So I think we have to continue to hold on to this old-fashioned vision of Aliyah, of moving to Israel, of focusing on Israel. And therefore, we have to work hard to strengthen the state of Israel, which allows people to go there. And even in our work here, think about it constantly as, am I creating, by my passion for the involvement in the Jewish community, at my synagogue, my school, my learning, that passion ultimately, God willing, will have an influence on Israel and on enabling people in Israel to lead a much more fulfilling Jewish life.
On behalf of myself and the Zionist Organization of America, I'd very much like to thank Rabbi Etzler and Nachum Menschel who organized this, and this wonderful audience, and also my distinguished co-panelists. Simply put, Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, which brought about the establishment of the State of Israel. And this succinct, accurate definition is in the current official platform of the Zionist movement adopted by the World Zionist Congress, the current World Zionist Congress, which is the parliament of Jews from all over the world, Jews from left and right. And it's been meeting regularly ever since Theodor Herzl founded the World Zionist Congress in 1897. The Zionists then is someone who supports the Jewish people's right to live in the sovereign state of Israel. The official Zionist movement definition states that Aliyah and so on, living in Israel, is central, but also explains the Zionism views a Jewish Zionist and secure state of Israel to be the expression of the common responsibility of the Jewish people for its continuity and future. In other words, diaspora Jews have a very important role. We have a collective responsibility to help assure Israel's continuity, strength, and security. The importance of its American Zionist role is starkly apparent right now, today, when the United States is on the verge of a deal that will allow Iran to keep and continue enriching uranium, develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, and advance centrifuges, severely limit inspections, and use $50 billion of additional annual revenue that Iran will receive when sanctions are lifted to finance terrorism against Israel and worldwide Jewry and America. Many experts agree with Minister Netanyahu's warning that the deal paves the way, Iran's way to the bomb. New York senators are very influential. We have to make sure to press our senators to do the right thing when it comes time to override a veto about this deal, unless the deal is remarkably different from what it looks like it will be at the current time. We need to make sure that Iran's Ayatollahs cannot do in 12 minutes what it took Hitler to do what Hitler took 12 years to do. Now, I certainly agree that Jews are dreamers and that there's an important place for that, but Jews have always been both dreamers and realists. That didn't change in 1948. There were Jews way before 1948. In fact, throughout the centuries, who lived in Israel, who lived out that dream of living in our promised land. There were Jews in 1840. Jerusalem already was a majority Jewish history. It didn't suddenly change in 1948. We have to be realists and we have to be dreamers throughout, and that's been the case throughout history and throughout the history of Zionism. Israeli member of Knesset, Danny Danon, recently wrote in his book, The Will to Prevail, an excellent book which I highly recommend, that Israel faces three major existential challenges right now. And incidentally, these are the same existential challenges that we as American Jews face. Iran's nuclear weapons is number one. Palestinian Arab terrorism is number two. Hamas, Fatah, Hezbollah, ISIS. ISIS is already present in Gaza. It's already a major force there. And the worldwide defamation of Israel, including the BDS movement. We can help in each case, and we are facing the exact same issues in each case. Iran is developing ICBMs not to hit Israel, which it can do without an ICBM, but to hit America. The boycott Israel movement and the defamation is happening right here on our college campuses. So there is an alignment right now between American Zionists and what American Zionists need to do to protect ourselves and what we need to do to protect Israel. We're facing the exact same challenges. And we have the responsibility to speak out about this. We have the responsibility to speak about BDS. And we also have the responsibility to speak out about concessions that harm Israel's security, such as when Israel lists checkpoints and then somebody gets killed right after a checkpoint is lifted. When Israel releases terrorists, we have a great response, and that leads to more people being killed. When Israel wants to make concessions, ZOA was one of the only groups that spoke out about Oslo and said it would be a disaster. We were right about that. We spoke out about Gaza, that withdrawing from Gaza would be a disaster, and it's led to great increases in the number of rockets falling on Israel. These are the important things that American Jews, dreamers and realists, need to speak out about. We face these very critical issues today, and we face them for centuries, unfortunately. The great American Zionist, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who I'm very proud to say was one of the former presidents of the Zionist Organization of America prior to becoming the first Jew to become a member of the U.S. Supreme Court, stated that Zionism finds in it for Jews a reason to raise their heads for taking their stand upon the past and to gaze straightforwardly into the future. So Zionism also embodies, as the rabbi stated, something that we can be very proud of. We can be very proud of Jews can be very proud of the accomplishments of the state of Israel. Israel is the only nation that rose up after 2,000 years of longing to return home and rebuilt a thriving state, its ancestral homeland, that despite being surrounded by vicious enemies who want to destroy her, is truly a light unto the nations. Israel is the first responder in Nepal, is the first responder in Haiti. With scores of wounded Syrians come over the border every day and get treated in Israeli hospitals at huge cost to Israel. And the brave Jews who lived in Israel continuously throughout the centuries are somebody, despite all the centuries of conquest and despoilation of our land, are an amazing inspiration. And Zionism is having the self-confidence and the dignity and determination to continue to protect and defend the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel now and into the future. The recent Pew Research study, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, said that 94% of Jews said they are proud to be Jewish, and I'm sure a lot of that is because of the state of Israel. 70% of Jews said that they feel very connected. They feel connected to the state of Israel. It gives us a source of Israel gives us a source of pride, and that's a big part of this. As Justice Brandeis said, that's a big part of Zionism. To our enemies, Zionism is a modern way to express Jew hatred. The great civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, said, when people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews. You're talking about anti-Semitism. Hamas, which is now part of the Palestinian Authority unity government, calls for the destruction of the Zionist entity, meaning Israel, meaning Jews, and calls for the murder of every Jew throughout the world. Zionism also makes defending Jewish rights and fighting against manifestations of anti-Semitism, including the scourge of boycotts, divestment, and sanction on our college campus. It also means that we have to fight BDS. That's a very important part of the mission of my group, Zionist Organization of America. We're on the college campuses fighting against the BDS resolutions. We're in Congress. I think we all have to get involved in fighting for a good federal anti-boycott law, good state anti-boycott laws, and unfortunately, there are groups like Partners for Progressive Israel that are fighting against this. They're fighting against the federal anti-boycott law. They're fighting against the Illinois anti-boycott law, and this is just Shonda. This is not what Zionism is about. We all have to be fighting for something that involves our own protection and the protection of the state of Israel.
Just let me ask you to take maybe one more minute to wrap up.
Okay, 1 more minute to wrap up. Herzl, regarding BDS, I did want to mention that Theodore Herzl, back in 1897, who founded the World Zionist Congress, wrote about the scourge of boycotts against Jews in his book. He said, no one can deny the gravity of the situation of the Jews. Wherever they live in perceptible numbers, they are more or less persecuted. Attempts are made to thrust them out of business. Also, don't buy from Jews. He also spoke about it in his book, Out to New Land. Things haven't changed. We have to, regarding this, there's a real resurgence of economic warfare against Israel. This is an important, another important issue that we have to deal with, both as American Zionists and in support of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you to each of you for opening words and getting our conversation started. I want to come back, Dr. Kurtzer, to something that you said about the re-invitation to the imaginary conversation, the dream conversation, and how we can participate in that. And to ask each of the panelists, what are the prerequisites for that conversation? In other words, what do we need to know about Israel? How do we learn about Israel? What's the curriculum in order to be educated and able to enter into that conversation in a robust, meaningful way? I could imagine anyone could stand up and participate in that conversation, but it seems it would be most successful if they were educated in some certain way, if they had picked up some base of knowledge, experience, understanding. What are those sort of prerequisites to the conversation for each of you?
You know, for a number of years, there were a lot of organizations working on college campuses in what's known as Israel advocacy work. David Project, for instance, is one of these organizations. And after a number of years of doing their traditional Israel advocacy work, they actually did a study and realized that it wasn't working. The reason it wasn't working was that when you hand an 18-year-old a fact sheet about Israel, unless they're already predisposed to the political outcomes that you're trying to indicate that you should support as a result of these facts, in which case they feel reinforced. To the majority of students, those facts come across as disingenuous. They may be the correct facts, but they come across as disingenuous because that's not how 18-year-olds think, right? They don't hand an 18-year-old a piece of paper and say, here are the facts of the conflict. Now that you know those facts, you know, in the narrative that you presented, what were the prerequisite to education? By that narrative is facts. I just don't think that that's how education works. And I think it especially doesn't work in an environment in which there's an unbelievable amount of access to information, and there are so many different competing narratives out there. The idea that what we ultimately should be doing around Israel is educating towards some sort of canonical narrative or some canonical facts, and then introducing complexity is, I think, part of what has gotten us into this problem to begin with. I think our children, even relatively little children, are better capable of understanding slightly complicated stories than we give them credit for being. And I think that our schools have played far too hard on the assumption of, well, while they're here, we're just going to incubate them in a nice environment of Israel that's about some combination of facts about the conflict, falafel, and Hallel, right? That's like the Holy Trinity. If we give them those three pieces of Israel, they'll be able to walk out and then experience complexity and experience complicated discourse because we've prepared them sufficiently for that. So what I want to do is push back against the question and say that I actually think that there's something flawed in the educational assumption that Israel should be educated with some sort of basic our side is right narrative, and then use that as a means to introduce complexity later. And seeing it in our work on college campuses, where we're engaging a lot of Jewish students to talk about Israel, and what they want as a means of entering into the conversation is the right to be able to ask hard questions. And the instinct by a lot of members of our community is to suppress the ability to ask hard questions by keeping those speakers out of Jewish institutions. Saying if somebody disagrees with us, they can't belong or speak in a Jewish institution. What our college students are seeing when that happens is they believe that their community is lying to them. There was a study that was done by Hebrew University professors in 2012, which said that over 50% of Jewish day school students believe that the minute that their school starts talking to them about Israel, they're selling them a bill of goods. They don't believe it. That's not true when it comes to teaching Tanakh or Talmud or other pieces of Jewish history, but somehow